all for coming to this special occasion. And I guess we should say, please silence your mole device. Often the one that needs reminding of being reminded of that myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Catherine, Director of Residential College for now. Very proudly a faculty member here since the 1980s. And I want to begin with two historical notes. It seems like it's more important than ever to give the land acknowledgement, because I think this would have probably great disapproval from on high, so let's go for it. The University of Michigan sits on lands granted by the Anishinaabe and Wyandot people, whose treaties and human rights have been violated numerous times during colonization of the United States. This history is a reminder that we must dedicate our scholarship to understanding the legacies of this past and work to create a more just future. Secondly, today is International Mole Day. Not for the underground mammal, and I'm a mammalogist, so that's why I first think of the mole underground, but the number 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd, 1023, October 23, of a substance that corresponds to the number of atoms in 12 grams of carbon. Avogadro's constant, which I remember from my chemistry class. And so I just thought it was an interesting item. It's also the anniversary of the first National Women's Rights Convention in Worcester, Massachusetts in the 19th century, a convention planned by the Anti-Slavery Society. So, very interesting day. I'd like to recognize RC staff members who helped organize this occasion, especially Katie Gass, who's the Marketing and Outreach Specialist for the RC, Candace Middlebrook, the RC Executive Assistant, and Jack Moody, who staffs the King Theater. I invite you all to stay after the panel for a reception in the lobby right out here. Now, I'm delighted just to welcome you to the Robertson Lecture this year, named in honor of the first director of the residential college, James Robertson. He was a professor in the English department and also on the LSNA Executive Committee. And notes from the 1960s say apparently the Executive Committee looks forward each week to Dean Robertson's report of the latest perils through which his college has passed. So I thought that was very amusing. And I suppose we're still passing through various perils. Robertson was part of the original planning committee for the residential college in the 60s. These were turbulent times in the United States and at the University of Michigan, with fierce debates about the Vietnam War, racism in society, and environmental degradation. The planning committee was committed to creating a new kind of educational experience within LSA, one that created lasting connections between faculty and students, that enabled students to have a larger role in shaping their own educational experience, and that connected college education to the world at large. And I'm delighted to see that there are a number of alums of the RC in the audience today. Thank you for coming. Many of these qualities created by the founders of the RC remain its foundation today, including commitment to self-expression, learning proficiency in a foreign language, social justice, and to experiential courses taught by a dedicated faculty. Fortunately, James Robertson lived long enough to attend the 20th anniversary of the residential college and to see that this bold experiment was thriving. He wrote that his experiences as a teacher and administrator at the RC were the most satisfying of his career. And in 2011, the Robertson family established the James H. and Jean B. Robertson Memorial Lecture to address topics in education and the liberal arts. Now I'd like to turn things over to Alyssa Bayraktar, the program head of Arts and Ideas.
Thank you, Catherine. When another Catherine, Catherine Brown, passed the baton to me to direct Arts and Ideas, she suggested attracting a big name to increase the visibility of the program. She gave me no other hints, just a big name. What, I wondered, could she mean? A big medievalist? Yogi? Critic? How was this big name going to materialize? Where would this person come from? Oh, what to think, what to do. How was I ever going to increase the visibility of our program? when suddenly, who should appear across my COVID Zoom screen but the heroic protector of undergrad ed, Dean Tim McKay, bearing tidings of good fortune. In the tradition of Deus Ex Machina arrivals on the musical stage, not with the parrot head umbrella, but via Delta Airlines, the big-time, big-name Broadway producer of Hamilton, Rent, In the Heights, Avenue Q, and more, was returning to his alma mater to teach. And Dean McKay thought Arts and Ideas would be perfect for his huzzah! But though Broadway has come to us in the form of the great Jeffrey Seller, you wouldn't know it. We've had no requests for limos, red carpets, dazzling lights, or caviar. No, our big-name Broadway producer slips unannounced into his shared office every Thursday, and then takes the stairs down here to the lower level of East Quad to teach a class to 15 or so lucky undergrads. The title of his course is not How to Make Millions from Musicals, or even The Business of Broadway, but rather America Dreaming, 100 Years of Theater, Art, and Politics. What our big-name Broadway producer has been so quietly and so generously taking the time to show our students is that reading, writing about, and discussing humanity's big ideas are ends in themselves. Sharpening one's thinking while striving constantly to be a good person, that's the recipe Jeffrey, along with Aristotle, we could say, has been sharing for a bright future, yes, even in business. Jeffrey's own story is testament to the axiom that good things come from first developing a nimble, analytical, and creative mind. Theater Kid will make you laugh, cry, and want to shout from the rooftops, preferably in a choreographed dance number, that it's possible to start life in Cardboard Village, go through U of M as a penniless political science major, and still reach the pinnacle of the production business, all while staying true to a love of live theater. Please help me welcome to the stage Arts and Ideas major Elena Mosley, RC Drama major Maverick Ludwig, and our beloved, big-name Broadway producer Jeffrey Seller.
Hi, friends. Good afternoon on this beautiful Thursday in the fall. Just want to break the ice.
We're so excited.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Maverick. Elena was my student last year, and Maverick might be my student at some point in the future.
I'm just a stranger right now.
Okay. You are my teachers, and I'm yours.
You trust us with that?
Begin.
Yep.
So we wanted to start off just by knowing about musical theater and what keeps you committed to it. Also, what would it take for you to produce an opera or a play instead? A lot of your work revolves around musical theater, so just kind of want to know, like, why is that the thing that you've chosen?
Why musicals? Though I don't speak German, and I'm sure someone here can help me, Richard Wagner said that opera is total art because it is the combination of music and poetry and drama and visual art all wrapped up into one. And I think that our American equivalent, which is the American musical, does the same thing. And I know that when I first saw a musical, when I was about 8 years old, it was not even a professional musical. It was the high school kids at Oak Park High School in a little theater doing a rock musical of Rumpelstiltskin. And it was called Rump. And I can still remember the title number when everybody was singing, everybody do the rump, rump, rump. And I thought, and I remember the lighting was very green. There was a lot of green on the stage, and of course that Rumpelstiltskin character was a tough guy. And I was like, I want to be in there. And when I saw a chorus line, when I was 13 years old at the Fisher Theater, and these actors and dancers came on stage, and they were actors and dancers playing actors and dancers. And they were wearing no costumes. They were wearing leotards or tights or sweatpants or tank tops. And out of their minds and bodies came the most powerful stories of yearning and desire and passion, but also shame and embarrassment and pain. And all of it was told through the most amazing songs I'd ever heard, with the most amazing staging I'd ever seen, even though it was on a stage with no set. Just that one white line and the black behind them, and our imagination filtered by the extraordinary staging and choreography of choreographer Michael Bennett. So, as the hair on my neck is standing, and I'm crying, and I'm cheering, I realize that I am having feelings watching a musical that I don't have anywhere else. That I've been surprised in a way that I'm not surprised anywhere else. That you sit in that chair and you don't know what's going to happen, you're like, whoa! And that feeling is what I've been chasing as a professional practitioner of the theater since I started with Rent in 1996. And that's why I'm still doing it, because I want to help make that feeling happen again for you, but also for me.
Fantastic. So in addition to your professional career as a thespian on Broadway, you also have the additional role recently of being a teacher, of being a professor at the university. And we wanted to ask, what is it that you do to prepare for your teaching course? What surprised you about the experience of teaching theater, and what is it that keeps you coming back to it?
I did not want to teach a course on how to be a producer. I never took a course on how to be a producer, and it kind of worked out. I wanted to dig deeper into American theater and this notion of modernism. The advent of American modernism, which really starts with Eugene O'Neill in the 1920s. And I was a poli-sci major. And my life has been a series of professional pursuits in the theater and avocational pursuits with regard to politics, whether it was being a political junkie, reading about politics, listening about politics, debating about politics, or particularly for me in the last 15 years or so, becoming an activist who gets heavily involved with politics and political campaigning and efforts to elect everyone from President Barack Obama to, of course, right now trying to re-elect for New York State House of Representative Democrats for next year, and then trying to find 4 more who can overtake currently red seats on the Democrat. And I'll be transparent about that. So as I work through all of that, I'm also interested in politics. And what I say to my own students is, what is politics? And when you're a 16-year-old and your parents have an 11 o'clock curfew, and you want to take the car, and you start trying to cajole, persuade, compel your parents to let you stay out till midnight instead, that's politics. Policy is when they say, okay, I'll change it to midnight. Politics is the argument over policy. And I thought, we gotta wrap this together with theater. And that's what led to American dreaming, politics, theater, and art in the 20th century. How does Hamilton reflect our politics, but also participate in our politics? And of course, we've had a lot of good examples of that, from the Secretary of the Treasury deciding that Hamilton was so important in 2015-16 that he was willing to change the policy of the $10 bill. Because what you may not remember is that they were going to take off of the $10 bill Alexander Hamilton and replace it with someone else. But the show was so powerful they decided to change the policy. So we were political without even knowing it. And then of course our own political activism expanded with the election of 2016, and then again in the election of 2020. So I continue to be interested in how is art in America, particularly theater art, a response to the decade and the politics, the socioeconomic politics of its time, and when are there instances where a work of art, whether it's Hamilton in 2015 or Hair in 1967, may affect our politics? Is it possible that at the height of the Vietnam War, Hair helped us to eventually end the Vietnam War? And it's so fun to study that, and I study it with the students. It's an iterative process where every year we learn more, and every year I learn with our students, and I learned from them today when I opened up the discussion and the students bring such amazing observations about American theater, which today was Sticks and Bones by David Ray, which was on Broadway in 1971 and won the Tony Award for Best Musical and the Pulitzer Prize for Drama.
Well, just to expand more on the class you teach and clarify for the audience, we analyze artistic pieces, theatrical pieces, musical ones, and we contextualize them basically in the political climate of their time. It really helps us understand American history from a different lens than a textbook or a typical history class. So I want to know, dig a little deeper into how you choose those pieces of examine.
Yeah, so we do a play every decade beginning in the 20s. And so when I came up with the idea for this class, which is frankly about 10 years ago, and my two kids, who are the age of many of the kids here who are in college, were still in high school, so I knew I couldn't do it. And I thought, I'll wait until my kids go to college as well. So it was like we were all going to college, because I went back to college. We all went to college that year in 2022 when I first started this. And I knew I had to pick one play for every decade, and I knew I'd pick Hamilton. And I knew I'd pick Rent. And I knew I would pick an Arthur Miller play, but I wasn't sure, should I do Death of a Salesman or All My Sons? And I had to ask, if I do Arthur Miller, am I going to be able to do Tennessee Williams? I'm getting very specific with you folks, just assuming your own history of the theater is deep. But so I just sort of went decade by decade, and I knew that in the 1920s, that was the beginning of American modern theater. Prior to that, as many of you know, we really didn't yet have a modern theater. We sometimes would do there were Shakespeare tours, there were melodramas, there were variety shows, and they'd already started the modern theater, as you know, in Europe with Strindberg and Ibsen and Chekhov. But we didn't have it, and O'Neill was our first. So that led me to the first play, which I chose as Anna Christie, which I did not yet know. I learned that play to teach it. And then we go into the 30s, which is the American Depression, so Clifford Odets becomes the obvious choice for that. And then when you get to the 40s with Arthur Miller, because I thought most kids are going to read Death of a Salesman in high school, we should do All My Sons. Because what better way to ask how did World War II affect the American dream? How did it further the American dream? How did it maybe conflict with the American dream? And I just kept going on from there. So we then went from Arthur Miller to Lorraine Hansberry and Raisin in the Sun. And then we progressed to Alice Childress, and now we're adding in Blues for Mr. Charlie. So and then I throw in a new one. Every year I'll change something up. And we keep going like that all the way until we get from 1921 to 2016, and we end with Hamilton in our final week.
Fantastic. So, touching into what you're going in there with your class and the importance of stories, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with stories, specifically. As shown when you and your fellows accepted the Tony for Best Made Scroll for Rent, producers have a unique relationship with the ownership of media that other, more individual art ventures don't share. Your biography details the many different hats you've worn in the theater world. You've been an actor, a writer, a director, but after your production of Grease, you become resolute on the idea that while other people can handle those responsibilities, producing is something that you feel uniquely drawn towards. What then do you feel is your relationship to storytelling as a producer, and how do you find it fulfilling in ways that other stage duties just simply don't satisfy?
The first and most important question a producer must ask himself or theirself or herself: what play do I want to do? How is this work a reflection in some way of my values, of my needs, of my yearnings, of my wants? Is this a kind of story I want to put into the world? Because there are many stories, and I can't do that many of them. I don't produce that often. I'm not prolific. It takes 5 years to make a new musical. So I have to really ask, is this a story that I want to, for lack of another word, adopt and make into my child, because I'm going to live with it every day? And if you look back on my musicals, Red was a good example of one in which the answer was a yes. So that's the first thing we do. And then the next thing is, how do I best support an artist? Because the most important thing I do is help artists realize their vision. Sometimes I'm cheerleader, sometimes I'm a complimenter, sometimes I'm lunch maker. Come on over, let's eat, we'll relax, and then we'll start to dig into the play. And sometimes I'm critic. When do I know now is the right time to say, I don't know what's going on in this play. I don't get it. I don't get these characters. I don't understand where they're coming from. This song is not affecting me. How do I organize those thoughts? And how do I impart them in the most compelling way? Because the only way I can have an impact on the play is if I win over the author's trust. So, what do I say, and when do I say it? And that's a bit of a talent, and a bit of a skill. And then, of course, if I'm lucky enough to get further along, my last name is not Seller for nothing. Because do you know what we do as producers? We sell. We have to sell the heck out of that show from beginning to end. Whether I'm trying to sell it, in Avenue Q, I had an amazing creative force with Bobby Lopez and Jeff Marks, and they needed a book writer. So sometimes you're selling someone, come and join us and write the book for this. Come and join us and be the director. You're trying to sell it to investors to invest in that place. You can afford to put it on. You're trying to sell it maybe to a not-for-profit theater to become your partner so that you can start there. You're trying to sell it to a New York landlord so that you can rent their theater. So that they'll rent you their theater for your show instead of someone else's show. There are so, and then I haven't even started with, and then you have to sell it to the groups, who hopefully buy tickets at 20 or 50 or 100 at a time instead of 2 at a time. And then of course you have to sell it to the end user, which is the regular single ticket buyer. Which if you're at the Richard Rodgers Theater, like we are tonight with Hamilton, is 1,360 seats. And you know what happens when you can't sell it anymore? You have to close the show. And think about it. There's a Tuesday where those actors come in to do their work, to earn their keep, to get their health insurance, their pension, their welfare, and take care of their family. And you have to come in on Tuesday before that show and say, I'm so sorry to tell you, but we have to close on Sunday. Or we have to close 2 weeks from Sunday. And that's part of the job too.
Amazing. Okay. So you sort of touched on this, like how you connect with the artists that you work with, but I am still someone who's very new to theater, and so first-hand accounts like are very insightful into what it's like to work in that sort of environment, and also to get into your book a little bit. Talk about when you're very young, you audition for a play, you walk in, and you think to yourself, I'm supposed to do it back home, but no one wants me out of there. And also interesting because theater can be stereotyped as being the best place ever or the worst place ever, very cutthroat or very welcoming. So for you as someone who's now in a position to influence your workplace culture, like what sort of environment can you create for yourself, actors, colleagues, particularly in vulnerable moments such as casting, and overall, like how do you combat stale or even toxic social norms of the theater world?
You know what, I think the theater world has made so much progress over the last 25 or 30 years in creating a safe and nurturing and productive space to play. And I am proud to tell you that I have always been in rooms that embrace individuality, that embrace artistic choice, artistic freedom, and artistic risk. And that when I look at the experiences of so many of my friends and acquaintances in New York, I hear about that all the time. So of course, not every room is the same, and I'm not saying there are rooms that can become, I guess the word is toxic in the creation of a play. But for the most part, I have experienced rooms that are nurturing. And maybe that comes from the top, right? That comes from the director, that comes from the producer, it comes from the authors. And I work with kind people because I want to work with kind people. And I think that what you're getting at is that certainly in the history of theater, there have been tyrants who were great directors. And sometimes they would direct through oppression, intimidation, and condescension. And I think what we learned over the years is it's not necessary in order to get the best results.
Fantastic. I also want to touch on a topic in the book that was a favorite of mine. So in one of the sections of the book, I connected to very strongly, it was in Act 1, Chapter 10, Old Men and Clowns, where you articulate the idea that these unconventional male roles of old men and clowns provided you with a space on stage when you were insecure about your identity growing up. I myself am very interested in thinking about and performing what I would call something like masculine drag, or an exaggeration of manly tropes to the level of parody. So I'd really love to hear more about how you think these types of characters provide a space for queer and closeted actors, both in the past and in the present.
Maverick, I have done at least 15 to 20 talks about this book over the last 5 months. I have never received that question. That penetrating a question. That's a biggie. So, thank you. That's a dangerous question. To give you a little bit of context, so when I started acting in plays, first in the 4th grade, I was in the Perm play at Temple Israel in Detroit, Michigan, now West Spokane, Michigan. And then I wrote a play, and then I remember when I was in 7th grade, I played, when I was 11, I played a 9-year-old boy that was like perfect casting, and that was a great experience. And then I seemed to play regular boys again. Like in 8th grade, I played a clown in this silly play called Popcorn Pete. And then I remember I played another clown in the Red Shoes in 10th grade. And then in 11th grade, I couldn't really sing that well, so when we did Pajama Game, I was cast as the Old Man Hassler. He was literally called Old Man Hassler, who was the boss of the Pajama Factory and the Pajama Game. And then I went to this Northwestern high school theater program, and I was doing this play called The Thwarting of Baron Ballagru, which is a children's play, and I was cast as yet like another one of these old knights of the Round Table. And what was happening, I realized as I was moving from pre-puberty into adolescence, is that I was comfortable doing double takes, making funny faces, doing voices, and I had reasonably good comic timing, and I had charisma on stage, and I was good on stage, but I didn't seem to be ever getting parts playing regular boys. And what I realize now, in retrospect, is that I wasn't comfortable in my own body because I felt inferior to boys. Because I didn't feel like I was good enough to be a boy. Because I was a bench warmer when I played Little League Baseball with my best friends, Bruce and Jay. Because I was afraid of the ball. Because I wasn't masculine enough. And there was this other moment I had when I went to that Northwestern high school theater program. It's called the National High School Institute for Theater Arts. It's between 11th and 12th grade of high school. And I had my first movement class ever in the theater. They did it like a conservatory. So you were like at Northwestern doing a conservatory training program for 5 weeks. And so every morning you would have a full class of movement and a full class of voice and a full class of acting. And my movement teacher said, "Do you do forensics?" Remember, a lot of you kids know forensics in high school where you do, I don't mean studying dead bodies, I mean like public speaking, off into a text. And I said, yeah, we do forensics in high school. And she said, well, you act from the neck up. And what I realized is I wasn't using my body because I was so ashamed of my body, uncomfortable in my body. And in this book, my only way, the only reason to write a memoir is if you have something courageous to say. And I knew that no one needs a book about another, kid who was poor, who went to New York and made it big. We've got that. No one needs another book about a gay kid who comes out and finally finds himself. We've got that, fortunately. We didn't have it 50 years ago, but we have it now, thanks to a great number of extraordinary men who wrote those books. We don't need another book about an adopted kid who feels like an outsider. And I was all of those things. And I thought what we might need is a book that's willing to go even deeper into that shame. And that's what this book did, and I thought the only way I'm gonna get through this is by confronting that very shame of how I didn't feel comfortable in my own body. And that, by the way, continued even when I was a student here, and it was right around then that I was starting to think of the big picture instead of the little picture, and being so attracted to directing and to producing. But that therein lies the title of that chapter, Old Men and Clowns, and of course the joke behind that title and the irony was that my father, who had never, my working class father, who anyway, he was a process server, he was a businessman, he had bankrupted 2 family businesses, he'd been in a motorcycle accident, he had a form of early onset dementia, and literally when I'm 16 years old, he says he wants to become a clown in the Shrine Circus. And that's what that chapter's really about. But anyway, so that's how that's how my father and I get tied together in that chapter, Old Men and Clowns. And thank you, Maverick, for that powerful question.
Yeah, so when you were talking about the relationship with your dad in the book, and just your other familiar relationships in general, it was very immersive for me. And it just really made me want to ask you, because my first contact with you was like by studying the actual pieces. Are there any pieces that you've seen, that you've read, that you've worked on that resonates the most with your family dynamic?
Oh wow, what a great question. My guess is I must have chosen all of these plays because I saw something in my family dynamic growing up. But my father, he probably could have gotten a book of his own. He was such a great character. In many ways, he was not a great father, but not being a great father can often lead to a very good character. And I had an experience where I was in 10th grade, it's even before Michigan, before I was a teacher, and Leslie Ann Pomerantz, my American Lit teacher, assigns, amongst many amazing plays that year, which introduced me actually to Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller and Truman Capote. She assigns Death of a Salesman, and I read this play, and I'm just like devastated by Willie Loman. And I go, how did Arthur Miller write a story of my father when my father was only 10 years old? Because of course, like some of you, my father was Willie Loman. I don't teach that play, but Bill Keller is not my father from All My Sons. My father is none of these guys and all of these guys, right? My father is Ozzy in Sticks and Bones, which we did today, and he's the father in Awake and Sing, and he's everyone and no one all at the same time. But that's why we love these plays. Because when we study each of these families, and most of these plays have an American family, whether it's Anna Christie or it's A Raisin in the Sun, these are our families. These American families are all of our families. It's all of us.
Fantastic. So connecting on that idea of seeing art in other people. I want to talk about, this was referred to me during a preparation meeting as something like secondhand starstruck. I was continually amazed by the wealth of legendary creatives involved both in your professional life, but also in your casual day-to-day. In the book, your next door neighbor, in one little story being Kurt Vonnegut, saying that In the Heights was better than Bob Dylan, which was a fun little section. Or your former babysitter being Kimberly Bellflower, playwright of John Proctor's The Villain. In that regard, what I'd like to ask is, what is it like to have such proximity with a vast array of artists at every level of your life, and how does that give you a perspective on the abundance of creative potential out there in the world?
Wow, thank you. Well, first of all, let me clarify. Kimberly Bellflower is not my babysitter. She was my children's babysitter. And it is true that when Kimberly Bellflower, oh, I could cry. When she came to New York right after graduating college in Georgia with her friends, and her best friend was in Spring Awakening, so she came with him, and she was friends with those kids, and she needed a job, and someone said, this young woman right out of college needs a job, so my partner then, and I hired her to be the babysitter for my two kids, who at that point were about 6 and 7, and my kids, May and Tommy. And she was our full-time babysitter for 4 years. And I would come home sometimes if she was working late for us from a play or from a dinner or something, and Kimberly would be sitting in the little family room. The TV was never on once, but she always had her journal ready. And after 4 years, I said, Kimberly, what are you gonna do? Because you know, I love you, and you're the best babysitter for my kids I could ever imagine, but what are you gonna do? And she said, I'm gonna go to graduate school for playwriting. And I think I'm gonna apply to UT Boston. And I said, great, I'm gonna write you a recommendation. And she went, and by the way, everything she did was her. And as hopefully all of you know, she wrote the extraordinary John Proctor's The Villain, which was a hit on Broadway this year, and was, talk about reflecting the culture and speaking to young people. Young women were enthralled because you know what they said? She sees me. Because Kimberly had this power to see, has this power to see you. So that's just dumb luck. Because the truth is, like, growing up, I had no dumb luck. Like, I came from Oak Park, Michigan. I went to Michigan. Our theater program was unremarkable at that time. There weren't any stars here. It's not like now where every single Tony winner, goes to the School of Music every week. That's not the way it was then. And the biggest theater practitioner came to Michigan, which I talk about in this book, was when the great lyricist of Fiddler on the Roof and She Loves Me, Sheldon Hardy, came, because he had written a musical based on the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And he decided, for a variety of reasons, to do it here at the now 2-year-old University of Michigan Musical Theater School. And I was also writing articles for the Michigan Daily, so I went and pitched the Ann Arbor News to let me write a series of articles. So then I wrote articles all about making a new musical, and I got to interview Sheldon Hardick. And that was really my first time being in the room with any theater practitioner who had actually made a Broadway show, better yet, one of the most iconic and successful Broadway shows in history. And I remember, you know what I wanted to know? How does a writer work every day? What's the day? What is it like to be a writer? How do you design a day? What happens when you wake up if you're a writer? Do you just go to work and work from 9 to 5? Do you work from midnight to 8? How does it work? And it was a great conversation, and he explained to me how if he could work on a few songs and get about 4 hours out, he would feel like he's had a good day. And I said, well, what do you do now after that? And he said, well, I have lunch with my wife. And then he said, and I live in New York, and you'd be surprised how many problems you have in a New York apartment. At that point, I'd only been in New York once. I didn't know anything about New York. And he's like, there's so many problems with the New York apartment. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're always waiting for the plumber. And you know what I found out 20 years later? He's right. I'm always waiting for the plumber. Well, anyway. My housekeeper's always waiting for the plumber. Okay. I didn't talk about Kurt Vonnegut, but once again, it's just dumb luck. Because in fact, at my house in the the 90s aughts, it is true that I had a home in Eastern Long Island, and Kurt Vonnegut was my next door neighbor. And literally he would just come over sometimes, and we would invite him over for lunch or for dinner. And one day he literally came over while Manuel was working on In the Heights at my house. And I said to Lynn, go play him the opening number. And Lynn was like basically working on a Casio. And Lynn played for Kurt the opening number of In the Heights. And that's when Kurt said, well, as far as I'm concerned, he's better than Dylan. That's the love of being in New York right at the time. Thank you.
That's awesome. So I want to kind of relate back to my Jeffrey here and shed light on another quote from the book in Speak of Murder chapter. Where auditioned for a play with a company that your former teacher, the Shining, had a profound appreciation for what she performed. So you're in the theater and you think to yourself, no, she God, I stand in her theater. And this evoked for me the idea of legacy. So I want to hear about how you want your legacy to manifest. What social things you want to establish or view solely with your professional endeavors and interests.
Thank you. I get emotional when you mention the name Miss Shively because she was my 6th grade music teacher. And she really widened the world of theater for me in such a big way. And I loved her. And I loved going to boys' choir at 7:30 in the morning. I loved going to her music class. I loved staying after school when she would coach the kids to prepare their auditions for the Pops concert. I loved staying after school when we painted the Yellow Brick Road for the Wizard of Oz and made decorations for our bicentennial celebration in the spring of 1976. And she was the person who told me about this thing called community theater, which I'd never heard of before, which is that there is this theater, it was in Clawson, Michigan, and she had herself been in a production of Oliver, in which she played the flower lady who gets to sing Who Will Buy This Wonderful Morning. And then the next spring she told me she was in a production of this new show, well, not a new show, but a show I'd never heard of called Gypsy. And she wasn't in it, I'm sorry, she was the music director, and she was showing me how that there were also like kids in that show, that they needed kids as well as adults. And she said to me she wanted to direct Oliver next year in our middle school. And she said, you should be the Artful Dodger, it's the fun part. And I spent the entire summer in between 6th and 7th grade looking forward. I would like be thinking about rehearsing Oliver with Miss Shively while I was sneezing and snot was running down my nose as I was cutting the back lawn every week because I was terribly allergic to grass. But when you gotta cut the lawn, you gotta cut the lawn. And on the first day of 7th grade, I had music class at 4th hour. And when I ran to her music room, there was another lady at the piano. And her name was Miss Palmy. And I said, where's Miss Shively? And she said she moved. And that's the last time I ever heard from Miss Shively. But I remember that she said she did community theater at a place called Stagecrafters. And I picked up the white pages for my little area in Oakland County, and I went to Stagecrafters, and it said they were on Bauer Street, and I made a cold phone call on a Saturday afternoon, and some lady goes, Stagecrafters. And I went, hi, my name is Jeffrey, or I don't even know what, I was like, are you doing any auditions for kids soon? And she said, are you a boy or girl? I'm a boy. I was 11. And then she said, well, we just had auditions for the youth theater play, so no. And I was like, oh shoot, I was so sunken. And then she said, hold on, but they're doing an adult play. I think they need a couple kids. Hang on one second. And I heard her go, hey, are these auditions next week open auditions or closed auditions? Can someone come? And they said, open. And she said, well, if you come next Tuesday, you can audition for this play. And lo and behold, I said to my father, can you take me to Stagecrafters to audition? And he said, the four most important words he ever said to me throughout my childhood, in spite of all of his other deficits, which was get in the car. And we got in the car, we went there, and I got the part, and that's how I got to Stagecrafters, and that's how Ms. Shively opened up my world in a way that I will forever be grateful for. Last night I had the wonderful privilege and opportunity to go to the last performance ever of the extraordinary ballet dancer Misty Copeland at American Ballet Theater. If you don't know this, Misty Copeland was the first Black principal dancer in the history of American Ballet Theater. And she was promoted to principal dancer, I think, in 2015. And there was a video last night in which her teacher from California talked about how she was teaching outdoors on like a tennis court, and Misty was a young girl sitting in the bleachers who was just interested and came down and said to the teacher, hey, I'm interested in this, and she just started teaching her. And it was the most moving part of the, watching Misty Copeland do a scene from Romeo and Juliet is one of the great experiences you could ever have. You've missed it, I got it, that's life. But the other greatest experience of last night besides that was hearing her teacher. And I saw her teacher after, and I just bowed down and I said, you were the most moving person tonight other than Misty. And God bless you because you changed the world. And if we can affect one person, we can change the world. And that's what I hope happens in many small little ways throughout my life.
Fantastic.
But maybe I'm most proud of all of the kids who felt like outsiders, who were gay, who were trans, who just felt alone, whose lives were improved by Rent.
All right, so we've finished with our time to provide you with our prepared questions. And we're now going to be opening up for questions from the audience. So our wonderful microphone assistant is going to take this microphone quickly from my hands.
Hi.
Hi.
So at the very beginning, you mentioned how when you go to a play or a show, you have the moment where it's just like, I feel it. And it kind of takes over. When producing, when do you feel that eureka moment? Or what does it feel like to have the eureka moment of other people will feel this too, I know that now?
Ah, good question. What's your name?
Hunter.
Nice to see you, Hunter.
Nice to see you.
First of all, I don't know what's going to make you feel it. Or you feel it, or you feel it. I have no idea if you're going to feel it. I only know if I feel it. So I only know that the first time I heard Light My Candle, in which Mimi comes in to Roger's loft and asks him to light the candle, and they sing this rock duet that reveals character, that reveals plot. They sing the most amazing melody you could possibly imagine, but it's a rock song, it's a rock duet, and I feel it. I know I'm gonna do it. Do I know if you'll feel it? I have no idea. And all during the time of making Rent, all we were trying to do is make a good show. And when I had to say to Jonathan at some point, and actually it was before that moment, I don't feel it. Because I feel like all you're writing is a collage of the East Village, and I don't understand the plot, and I don't understand the characters. That was what I had to say to him a year and a half before that. And I was like, I don't feel it. What are you trying to do? So the answer is, I have to feel it. It's so subjective. But my hope is that if I feel it, and I please me, and I've just produced a great story, and it's giving me the sense of surprise. It's pricking my ear in a whole new way through sound, through music. Others are gonna feel it too. T-O-O. And if I feel it, I hope you'll feel it. And that's all we can do. Because when someone says, do you know if it will work? No. I did not know if Rent would work. I knew that Hamilton was yet another creative leap forward for Lynn after he and I had already done In the Heights together, but I didn't know it would become, I didn't know people would feel it like they felt it. You know, I didn't know it would have multiple billions of streams and you know, sell a couple million albums and more albums than any other Broadway show. And you don't know, you can just please yourself. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, my name is Maddie, and yeah, I work here in RC, the Physical Creative Art Project by day, and I'm a composer and theater artist by night. So when you were saying one time you create at night.
Yes.
And I guess I'm wondering, and this is a question kind of thinking back to earlier in your career, how do you balance the idea of maintaining your art, continuing to create art in the midst of the world and needing to make money and needing to pay bills and not, you know, trying to find opportunities? How do you balance it all? What are some strategies for that?
Yeah, so hard. That's what Jonathan Larson's musical Tick Tick Boom is all about, which was seminal for my relationship with him. Yeah, so, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I worked by day as a booker for Barry and Fran Weissler. I was booking the national tour of Robert Goulet in South Pacific. I'm gonna repeat that, folks. Robert Goulet in South Pacific. And that's how I earned $800 a week at the Weissler office in 1988. We do what we have to do. But while I was doing that, I was also producing plays at night with Andrew Lippa, who goes on to write Big Fish and Addams Family and John and Jen, his musicals. And Jonathan Larson, as you well know, worked at the Moondance Diner 4 days a week, or 3 days. I think he could work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then be off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He might have even been able to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And he did not stop working at the Moondance Diner until 1 month before Rent started rehearsals in November, December of 1995. It's hard. Lin-Manuel Miranda was a substitute teacher at Hunter High School in New York City when I met him. Alex worked somewhere. I forgot where else. Everybody worked somewhere to pay those bills. And how you balance it, that's right. Hopefully you're a Libra. I'm a Libra. But anyway, you have to balance it and figure out at what point do you feel like you have enough income to be able to break it off and say, now I'm going to become a full-time artist. But what I say is, you do it when you finally start getting paid. You know, most of you kids won't know this. There was this author, he wrote like The Hunt for Red October. He did those movies that like Sean Connery did, and those movies like Submarines Under the Ocean anyway, my point is he was an insurance salesman. And he worked by day as an insurance salesman. I feel like it was The Hunt for Red October. And by the way, his prose was perfectly mediocre, kids. But that guy could write plot. And he became one of the most successful novelists of his time. But literally, he was doing it while he was working by day as an insurance salesman. And And that story is as old as art. And all I can say to you is, you are in good company, and you must forge on and persevere until that moment when the art you're making can actually pay for your dinner. And I wish you well.
Thank you so much to Jeffrey, also to Elena and Maverick. Thank you both. We're very grateful for all of your wisdom and for the conversation. Thank you all for coming. I encourage, we have a reception right out here, so that you can all continue your chatting and questions. I encourage everyone up in the balcony to please come downstairs and join us. Also, for those of you who have bought this fantastic book, there are signed book plates available in the lobby, so that you can, have that too. And once again, thank you. This was fantastic.